Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of Kevin Can F Himself. A great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, picking up in the aftermath of the last episode, you have Patty waiting for Allison after, talking to the cops and everything. And obviously it's this little bit of an awkward thing of like, oh, Detective Ridgway? It's like, oh, hey, you. And it's kind of, all right. Then Kevin comes around and goes, immediately I appreciate getting the answer I wanted. Because, okay, so when Kevin comes into the scene, how are they going to handle this? A little jokey? And it's like, yeah. But do notice it's not as jokey as it probably normally would have been. There's a few jokes and laughs here and there, but there's not that much, and especially because it's so interesting because Kevin's demeanor is just so bleh, because usually he's like the life of the party, like nothing can bring him down, and in this moment he's kind of been brought down. Even the intro, yes, there's always a whole laughing and stuff like that, but I feel like maybe I noticed it more where it seems like the laughing cut out even quicker than it normally does, and it even has that audience member coughing thing, this, it's just dead silence and just hearing someone cough. Maybe it's always been like that. I've always noticed a laugh trap, but I feel like maybe that's just me trying to correlate. Maybe it's always been there, but I'm paying extra attention to it in this particular case, just because that normal sitcom vibe that it has got completely thrown off, because I'm like, this is something pretty serious, which, to be fair, there are plenty of, especially a lot of, I don't know if a lot of more modern sitcoms will deal with it, but I mean, obviously, most of the sitcoms I watched were in the 90s, so, they dealt with, the whole, oh, it's a sitcom that dealt with some, various, very serious topics and stuff like that, so I wonder if this is kind of, almost emulating that to a certain extent. Obviously, the moment he comes back, Neil is hugging Kevin like crazy, and it's just, but you can see just Kevin's demeanor's down. Pete and Neil are trying to be there for him, laughing. Even Neil telling him the worst advice ever, but to basically bury it deep inside in a cookie pocket. It's like, that's an ulcer. It's like, no, it's a cookie pocket. It's like, oh, listen to her trying to be a nurse telling you what something medical is, or blah, 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 blah. And he's like, but Kevin, it's just kind of like, nah, I don't, it's like, nah, I'm just going to go lay down. Maybe I need to sleep this off. And then Neil is like, hey, we could go out there and make a fort together. And he was like, no, I just want to be alone right now. And I'm like, that's so interesting, because the entire series, we've never seen Kevin like that. And I think it's almost interesting because Allison spent the entire series miserable, and I think for the first time, Kevin was off. He was miserable, and I think that was just kind of interesting, even to the point, Neil's like, oh, I guess, Pete was like, yeah, I guess it finally, you learned that thing, I guess it just took you this long to learn that, and, Pete, Neil was like, oh, that forts are dumb? He's like, yeah, forts are dumb, buddy. But obviously Allison and Patty have to figure out what are we going to do, because everything went wrong, because Nick got shot. It's like, well, where did the gun come from? Oh, us. We supplied him with the gun when we buried him in the backyard. It's like, well, how do you find it? It's like, because, it's Kevin, and he has a metal detector, and it's like, and even Patty's kind of upset, because it's like, right. So their whole plan of putting everything on Kevin fell apart, because Tammy's still going to be looking for a dealer so that could fall back on Patty. Plus, Kevin is still, Kevin, which I don't think he is. Well, they just mean alive, but he's somewhat himself, but not really. And I immediately was like, oh, are we going to have, Allison spent this entire time wanting to kill Kevin? Is it ironically going to be that through this experience that he's going to change and become a better version of himself? And Allison's going to come oh, I guess I don't have to kill him anymore? I thought that might be what it is. But to be fair, even later on, Allison's like, oh yeah, he's like that for today. So she's like, usually if something gets Kevin down, I think he usually bounces back the next day or two. So for her, it's like, whatever he's dealing with right now, he'll bounce back from it, which ironically enough, not even ironically, but honestly enough, he ultimately does end up bouncing back from it. So she was kind of right. Granted, it just took a little motivation from other people. Basically he's making it too, so I can't go to work, and then he goes to the bar, the beer doesn't even taste the same, but for him it's he's like, basically this world is going to hell, and a whole bunch of people rally behind him. It's like, yeah, you telling it like it is, and Kevin's like, oh yeah, I'm the guy that tells it like it is. So he just took it upon himself to say hey, I'm running for city council now, and it's like, okay, this biggest schmo is going to go running for city council. I think it's so interesting that Neil and Allison were on the same page of being like, man, maybe you shouldn't kind of go through with this, bro. Because for Neil, it is a situation of, it would have just been another thing pulling him away from his, Kevin away from him, and he's kind of got some attachment issues, especially when it comes to Kevin. Like, it doesn't seem like he has that relationship with anyone else but Kevin. Why that is, who knows? Well, it might kind of deal with what Patty brought up like a couple episodes back. Remember, Neil's the one that found their mom dead, so I'm like, maybe there's some like psychological stuff there. I'm like, once again, he doesn't feel necessarily that same attachment to Patty because they were, but to be fair, that was mainly, I was about to say like they kicked Patty out of the group, and I'm like, and to be fair, that was mainly a Kevin decision, and Neil is kind of a yes man when it comes to Kevin. So I don't know, I just thought that was interesting. But I love Allison trying to spin it too, be like, oh, but the fact of the matter is this and that. It's like, there's a lot of vocabulary involved in this whole city council thing that, like, do you really want to go through? He's like, you're right, you know me so well, because, like, that does sound like a lot. But he's like, no, I'm going to do this. I'm gonna clean up this city, yada, yada, yada. And it's like, oh, interesting. I mean, it's interesting that this experience would kind of have a somewhat positive effect on him, but I guess it's like, all it does is make Kevin even double down in, like, you thought for a moment he potentially could change, but all it did was make him double down in who he is. And now he's just going to double down more and be in a position of power. Because that's the sad thing is, most likely Kevin would win. I think that in itself would kind of play into what Allison brought up later on about how, like, Kevin always wins. It always just seems like things come up Kevin where just everyone else kind of, like, has to suffer the ramifications of him winning. It's like, oh, wow, he's doing great for herself, as well as a lot of people just kind of end up being miserable around him to a certain extent. I mean, to be fair, it's not just him. It's kind of Pete and Neil as well, but it's like, because Patty's kind of woken up to, like, Kevin's BS. Like, she can, like, finally see the no longer sunshine and rainbows that comes from Kevin's BS, you know? So, I don't know. I think that's kind of fascinating. I think, like, that's even more reason why she wouldn't want him to be the dick that he is and give him power at the same time, but she knows he could easily sway a whole bunch of people to vote for him. There's a whole bunch of people that rally behind because Kevin is Kevin. So I think that is even more reason why she doesn't want him to run. But nevertheless, there was this neat little moment earlier when Patty and Allison were talking about what they were going to do next. It's like, right, what we're going to do is we're going to take those pills and stuff, and then we're going to take them over to Nick's place, and we're going to put them there and make it seem like he was the drug dealer. And even Patty being like, that helps me, but how does that help you? And she's like, well, at least I'll know that you're okay. And I was like, oh, that's super sweet. It's like, yeah, my situation still sucks, but we can help you, Patty. I'm like, that's super sweet. Like, the moment she ran into Kurt, I was like, oh, well, Patty did. I'm like, oh, that's going to be interesting. Didn't expect it to play out the way it did. We'll get to that later on, but I was like, yeah, probably haven't seen each other since she went over to his place trying to repair their relationship, just because it was a thing of, right, she didn't want to be alone. So, like, why not settle, just because I just don't want to end up alone. So she's trying to pretend like everything's fine and dandy. Like, oh, I was crazy at, but it's like, no, we should be together. Just so it is a situation so you just don't end up being alone. Ultimately, they snuck into Nick's place and tried to plant the evidence, which I love that, like, Patty has to be like, do you think he would really put, like, the drugs or the pills inside of his sock drawer, or, like, his clothes drawer? And then later on, it's like, wait, he's got a bag full of stuff. We need to take this, because if it looks like he was leaving, then why would he be doing what he's doing? Like, it's like, right, we got to set the scene and put some of his stuff back up, which Patty was like, do you think he would really be putting his clothes on a clothes hanger? But his mom comes home, and Patty bails. I was like, no, Patty, don't tell me you bail. But we had to fake out like that early in the episode because she left, but she came back with alcohol. And then this time her sneaking out so she could go to the front door and distract Nikki's mom, which, interesting how that, that whole bit, like, both of those times, like, her kind of faking you, the audience, out a little bit. It's like, oh, it's interesting how that kind of foreshadows, but we'll get to that later on. But I thought it was kind of interesting, like, it's a small enough town where, like, everyone knows some idea of what's going down, especially because it's like, oh, she knew it went down in their the neighborhood that Patty lived, but not knowing that whose house it was that actually got broken into. Because I was like, do most people not know that Patty and Kevin are siblings? Like, I wonder, is that, like, not a known thing, or maybe only people close enough to them know? Like, I guess the general audience, like, I guess it's like, well, to be fair, it's like, right, like, she knows Patty through work, so she never got to know Pat. Well, visiting Patty at her job to, get the hookup. But it's like, of course, she never got to probably know Patty on a personal level, so she wouldn't know, like, oh, probably hear, like, oh, is this person's house that got broken into? It's like, oh, probably doesn't even know that Patty lives right next door, so it's interesting to think about. But obviously, we also get the tidbit that, hey, your boy Nick isn't dead. It's like, oh, yeah, you pulled the plug on him, but he's still fighting. He's in a critical coma, but you're like, no. Allison's worried about that. Well, and Patty's not as much, because she's like, oh, it worked out. We framed him and everything. All's good. But it's like, for Allison, she's worried because it's like, I still think that's like, yeah, things. Allison isn't going to be lucky enough for Nikki to just stay in that coma. It's like, no, he's going to wake up eventually. And if anything comes to him, like breaking into because to be fair, he'd already gotten fired from his job, and that was already going to be an issue for his parole officer. Now this would have really screwed him over. Now what he's going to do is probably to lighten his sentence and make things easier on himself. He would probably would most likely turn on Allison and Patty, because that's ammunition he has in his back pocket that he could be used for his benefit. So hearing that he's still alive, I was like, oh, that is a little worrying. Patty isn't as worried, but it's also for her, it's like she looks at Allison try to do, like, constantly worrying about everything. It's just kind of like, oh, you're kind of a bit of a worry wart, just looking for something to go wrong. But for Allison, it's like, we've got to find some way, because like for her, she doesn't know what the cops know. So it's like, right, I need you to tell, looking at Tammy's notebook, she's like, I can't. It's like, come on, girlfriends, as in, like, I was like, wait, does she not know that Patty and Tammy are a thing? Did, like, Patty just isn't comfortable enough to tell her? So it's like she's still pretending like they're just friends. So it's like, right, you can just pretend like you were looking for lipstick or something like that. It's like, you've never had any girlfriends, have you? And it's like, I guess, like, in that sense of just like girl space friends type of situation. Like, that's what she was kind of referencing. I was like, which kind of, from what once again, we haven't even, other than like Sam, which isn't just a friend thing, that's on and off again thing, affair, cheating type of thing. But like, other than that, we haven't ever met any of Allison's friends or anything like that. So just kind of gets you wondering, like, because that's a conversation she brought up earlier in the season about Sam being like, oh yeah, like, she lost touch with a lot of her friends. But just the fact that Allison was like suggesting this one thing, but it's like, no, you've never had enough girlfriends to actually really know that that's not something that would just be like a good enough excuse, or be like, oh, that's the most normal thing. It's like, no, that's not how people, she's just basing that, I guess, on just what she believes like goes on between girls like who are friends, but I just thought that was kind of an interesting detail, because it's just like, I guess she's so like out of the loop on just being kind of a quote unquote normal human being to a certain extent, because a lot of her relationships, like friendships and stuff, are kind of kaput. So but she's asking and begging Patty to do it, and Patty kind of did it, because it's like, it's for Allison, and Allison's done so much for her, so it's like, right, this is the least I can do. So and while she's hanging out with Tammy, you do notice that, like, I never noticed it before. It's probably always been there, but obviously she's cleaning the shelves because they're super dusty, and it's like, oh, like, when did business start dying down? She's like, oh, recently. It's like, right, most people were coming to you for your product, so, and not your actual product. So you would have thought you would have handled that a little bit sooner, considering you're dating a cop. Like, but I guess it's like, once again, they're not criminal masterminds. You don't think of everything, but I think she started thinking about it now that Tammy's there and everything, but Tammy's not reading too much into it. Luckily for Patty, like, love is blind, so, like, right, when you're dating someone, you're not going to necessarily see a lot of the, like, flaws that she should be seeing as a cop of, like, this doesn't add up, this is kind of wrong. I'm going to go ahead and jump to it. I love that Kurt's the one that kind of screwed the pooch on that, because he came to check on Patty. It's like, oh yeah, I heard about everything that happened. It's like, oh, but that was next door, which I was like, once again, she still doesn't know that Patty and Kevin are siblings, because of course, it's because Tammy's almost like, why would that be traumatic to Patty? Like, he lives next door, because she only knows, like, that, because I guess for her, it's like, oh, you're only there for Allison because you're trying to be moral support for Allison, not just like, oh, that's also your brother. Because she knows, like, oh, Neil's your brother, but she doesn't know about Kevin and hasn't pieced those two puzzle pieces to the puzzle together. Because once she does, I'm sure a lot of stuff is going to fall into place. But I love that, Kurt, it's like, oh, and then he kind of figuring out, like, oh, Tammy and her, and she's like, I just came to check on her, it's pretty traumatic. It's like, nah, she's fine. Actually, she's never been happier. It's like, it's so interesting that like she must have immediately realized like, oh, that's. I wonder, did she interview, like when she interviewed like them like last time or something like that, did she find out about Kurt and her dating? Is that why she knows, or did she kind of get the feeling like, oh, you're the ex? I don't know what it was, like whatever the situation was, she was kind of digging in a little deeper to be like, oh, she's with me and she's happier than she's ever been. And Kurt trying to dig back, it's like, yeah, there's just certain things that never like made sense to me. But the fact of the matter is, maybe you'll be the one to figure it out. You know, you being a cop and everything, he was just so smug about it. It's like, oh, you suck, Kurt. You were just digging deeper back because it's like you were a little heartbroken and you didn't like the new person in her life kind of making you feel bad of like, oh, like she's super happy with me, never been happier. It's like digging it super deep. I mean, to be fair, maybe on some level Tammy could tell he was a little insecure with just a lot of his responses, so she knew exactly like, just to stick the knife in pretty damn deep or something in that regard. So I just thought that was fascinating. But that started getting Tammy thinking like, right, started noticing things that, right, she has questions, but she never really dug too deep on any questions and kind of let them go because like, right, she's infatuated, she's in love with Patty, so it kind of, she has blinders on. Now looking around the shop, she's starting to kind of piece things together because it's like, right, why is this shop so dusty? Like, if even it was more recently that you were selling this product, it's like, what were people coming in here for if you're not using this or selling all it, you know? So that's kind of not working out for Patty. Allison, really quickly, circling back, like Allison and Sam, you know, Sam coming over to apologize because he was like, right, saying all that I said to you, and even bringing up the fact is that he left Jen, and because at first, like, he was like, him and, you know, Allison trying to figure their thing out, and she starts kissing him and is like, we shouldn't be doing this, but for her, it's just like, everything with Kevin kind of went wrong, and she just kind of wanted to go back in this moment of feeling good, you know? And then he's like, yeah, I left Jen. Like, maybe this could be our start, you know? And Kevin comes in, and it's like, hey, like, oh my God, your place is so empty. So we could use this as an opportunity. That could be where my campaign is held and stuff like that. And I love that. And once again, Allison's like, oh, maybe Sam doesn't. She keeps trying to say it, but Kevin tries to get his way of like, no, you're missing the point. You didn't get it. Like the pun I made, meet and greet, meet as in M-E-A-T. It's like, no, I got it. No, maybe Sam doesn't. He's like, no. It's like condescending, not giving her any time to talk. Once again, it's understandable why she hates Kevin. But once again, you also have to recognize, and I do realize, Allison's not a good person, but she's the not good person I've chosen sides with. It's kind of like Good Girls in that regard of like, you guys aren't necessarily, I mean, Beth's not a good person, but man, I'm super ride or die with you. I mean, you're good in certain regards, kind of not so good in others, so I'm kind of like ride or die with you in certain regards. So it's kind of like, despite all the criminal stuff you're doing, it's kind of same vein, like I said, Marty and Wendy, or like, you know, Walter White, if you want to go, you know, specifically AMC, you know, wise. But and so the whole get together is there. Allison's more so supposed to be like the picture wife and stuff like that, and I take the pictures, kind of smile and everything, and just obviously Allison's got more to worry about than Kevin's stupid situation of being celebrated, but him being so celebrated pisses her off even more, because it's also like the backlash too, because like you also see like some of the people there are the people like that bit, like she tried her best to like, you know, it's like, oh, his boss, it's like, right, I try to put on this whole thing for you, a boring party for your boss, but your boss ended up liking you for you despite me doing all that I did for you. And it's like, right, he found out a party and celebrated with you, so what was all that I did was for nothing, and just trying to put on the best front kind of failed in that regard. There's the cops, and it's just like, oh yeah, these are the cops that were rallying behind Kevin at the restaurant 2 episodes ago, when he was going up against that dude Sean in that competition. So, and that's what pisses her off more when she talks to Sam of like, no, nothing the bastard does ever, like, he shot someone, and what do people do? They celebrate him. It's like so many people are rallying behind him. It's just like, no matter what happens, Kevin always wins. It's like, for her, there's no getting away from it. So, like, part of her is like, why even bother anymore? Might as well give up. You and me, she's like, we can run off somewhere together. And Sam's like, wait, so being with me is giving up? And she's like, no, that's not what she meant, I think, more so in the sense of giving up trying to, like, keep up this front, or at the very least, like, give up trying to I guess, escape life from being what it is, in the sense of she is where she is in life, and that's just how it is. Like, there's no, like, getting better, doing more. Like, who she is who she is. But obviously for Sam, he's just kind of like, and then he says that line, which is super condescending, of like, if only you could help yourself. Like, it can come from a good place in certain regards. I don't know how you say that without sounding condescending. It's like, if only you would help yourself. And it's like, wait, what? It's like, it's like the back and forth of like, for him, it's like, you could be so much more. But for her, it's like, why can't me just being me be enough? Like, why isn't me being this kind of broken individual? Like, if you can't accept me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. But if you just can't accept me as me, because the one person who accepts her is Patty. It's like, Patty's actually like, oh, here you are, broken and everything. It's like, I actually, I like you this way. Like, because that broken side of Allison is kind of who she is. And it's like, I guess it's kind of what, at least how Allison feels like, that's me. That's the real me. And it's like, Patty can accept and even like that side of me, but for her it almost feels like Sam likes kind of like the fake image that she puts up of who she is. Like, it's almost like, right, I'm supposed to backpedal into being the wallflower that I am, just kind of going the flow with so much in my life, instead of kind of putting my foot down, sticking my middle finger up to it. At least that's how I interpreted it. Because early in the episode, Patty was like, actually, like, you're scaring me how calm and cool and collected you are about it. So it's like, what? Would you rather me be in a tub crying? She's like, honestly, yeah, that would actually make me feel a little more better than you just acting like everything's okay. Like, oh, things ain't going according to plan. Like, well, let's be calm and move on to the next thing despite everything happening. I mean, someone did get shot in your house and you're just not too torn up about it. I mean, So, but this all showcases, once again, Allison not necessarily being a good person herself, that she can be manipulative, and even Patty calls her out. It's like, right, I didn't answer my phone because I wanted to yell at you in person. It's like, because of you, I went into Tammy's book and looked to see what she had on you. And you know what she had on you? Nothing. She was actually jealous because she thought you and me hung out a little too much and thought you were just kind of, you were kind of described you more as a victim, which I'm sure, like, obviously that probably rubs Allison the wrong way as well. But for Patty, what pisses her off, it's like, you knew. You're saying, pretending like friend, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, you knew that me and Tammy were more, and you knew, like, when you asked me what you were doing, that you should ask me to do it, because it would mean betraying my girlfriend, but you knew, and, in fact, she's like, that's why you helped me out with the next thing, because you knew that when you asked me for this favor, that I'd be indebted to you and have no choice, because, like, right, she did something for me, so I should do something for you. And it's like, is that the truth of the matter? I don't know. It's hard to say. You can't always be 100% sure of Allison's motives. I mean, she's made it clear what she's wanted from the beginning, but, would she use Patty to get what she wants? I don't know. I think it kind of is like a happy coincidence, but maybe somewhere in the back of her mind, Allison did think that. But I feel like Allison would manipulate and use other people. I don't know if she would necessarily use Patty, but maybe that's also the thing of like, no, like maybe she is a lot more of a master manipulator than I've kind of given her credit for. Like, if you go back and look through the course of this series, you kind of see a lot of like the manipulation. I mean, it's not like, oh, this is the first time. It's like, no, she's done it quite a bit over the course of this season alone, of like how she's manipulated a lot of circumstances to benefit herself, so my point is, you can't quite throw out that maybe she's manipulating Patty, that there might be some validity to the points Patty was making, but I thought she skipped over it too when she kind of went back into the party, taking some shots, and they're like, whoa, you need to slow down, like, you're supposed to be putting up this essence of like, you're supposed to be the wife, and it's like, oh, what about you? Like, what is your image? And he's like, this is my public image. Like, once again, he's able to drink and just be whoever he wants to, and just, I love that Allison's like, you think you're an everyday hero, Kevin, but you're just a dick. No laugh track or nothing. She just walks out, and then they immediately turned it into a gag by being like, oh, Kevin McRoberts, everyday hero. And it's like, oh yeah, once again, nothing's ever a loss for Kevin. Everything is a win. Once again, proving like Allison's point even more. Like I said, I think at the end of this, he actually will win the city council, which God help everyone else, right? Allison and Patty have their back and forth because it is a thing of, because for Patty, it's like, she's the only person I have, and it's like, for Allison, it's like, wait, what? No, it's not. Don't. How is she just the only person? Like, what? Almost being like, what am I, chopped liver? Like, no, you and me, we've done some bad things. I know the bad things that you done. It's like, well, you tried to kill your husband, and it's like, well, you did the whole situation with the deal. So it's like them kind of throwing shade of like all the terrible things that each of them's done. And just when Patty's about to leave, like, Allison's just kind of like, no, I don't want to like leave things as they are, because for her it's like, you're my, and it's like, she's kind of what, and it's like, Allison can't quite bring herself to say it, and Patty's like, huh, and she's like, well, fine, you go, well, fine, I'll go, and you go, blah, blah, blah. And she goes in the kitchen. The moment it shifts to this, the sitcom, I'm like, oh, is Kevin there? Did he overhear everything? Interesting situation to be in, too, for it to be a serious thing of him, like, Neil busting out the closet. I was like, that's fascinating, because he was, because Kevin decided to be like, oh, yeah, let's play hide and seek, buddy. And it's like, yeah, interesting how that worked out. But he's like, yeah, got everything. It sounds like he recorded it on his phone. And it's like, oh, but like I said, they're trying to play it up a little bit for a laugh, because it's like, oh, she's like, what are you talking about? You know what I'm talking about. Do you know what you're talking about me talking about? Like, I know exactly what I'm like, that whole bit. They're playing it up a little for laughs, but it's a very dramatic, intense moment. And then it gets like, obviously she's trying to get his phone. He starts choking her, so it's like he's in the wrong there under the circumstances. But he did just find out, like, wait, you were like, once again, we know how he feels about anyone trying to take his brother away in a metaphorical sense. This was a literal sense of like, oh, you're trying to have my brother killed, and I have proof of it. And then Patty pops in, smashes the bottle over his head, and came to the rescue. And I'm like, that's what I was referencing earlier about, like, it's interesting, like, the whole Patty leaving and then coming back in to kind of save the day in regards of, like, oh, let me come back with the alcohol. Let me come back and distract Nick's mom. And now coming back to save Allison. And it's like, you're not going to tell Kevin anything. Because at first I was like, are they about to straight up murder Neil? Because it's like, right, she wants to kill her she's fine with her other brother dying. But it's like, Neil, you're kind of like a lovable dope. Kevin's just kind of a asshole dope. So it's like, he can go, especially because he's the one Allison has the biggest issues with being married to and everything. So, and then like, it's like, are you okay? Because Allison's hand is cut, and they hold hands, and you're like, oh, that's actually really sweet. Because I don't know whether that's just more than a friendship, whether it's a bond or whatever it is, that relationship I think is so interesting. Very Thelma and Louise, like, I don't know if that's going to be like a thing of like her, whether it's like they're going to get together thing, or whether it's just like, oh, we're bonded, and like we've, once again, kind of a Thelma and Louise thing, like maybe we bonded over like the terrible stuff that we've done. Who knows like how far they'll decide to like take that relationship. But it is a thing of like, they are important to each other. It's not just like, it's like, because she recognizes it's like, it's not just Tammy that's like, she recognizes like, I do have Allison, that yeah, I might have my issues and everything, but it's like, you are the only other person, like they know each other, like there's no one else that knows each other. They can confide in each other, like we know the worst thing each other's ever done and what we've been a part of, and some of that terrible stuff we've done together. So it kind of makes us partners in crime. So like I said, an interesting development, even a very interesting way to end off the season too. It makes you kind of excited to see what potentially could happen going forward. At the time of me recording this, Kevin Can F Himself hasn't been renewed and or canceled, which obviously I'm really hoping for a renewal, because I would be so interested to see what they do with season 2. Obviously, like, the big question is, with the ending, like, how are Patty and Allison gonna handle all of that, like the Neil's situation? Because like I said, I was like, are you gonna kill him? But I don't think they're gonna do that. But it's like, how do you keep him from not saying anything? Like, do you blackmail him? I'm like, do you actually like kidnap him, hog tie him, and leave him somewhere till you ultimately decide what to do? Like, what's gonna happen there? Obviously, Kevin running for congressman, for city council, sorry. What's gonna happen in that regard? The Nick situation, I brought it up earlier. He's in a coma, and just to screw Allison and Patty over, he's going to end up waking up just to complicate things. So how that's going to play out. Tammy is getting suspicious of Patty. Now, is Patty going to be able to shift that to be like, all right, like, once again, because Tammy still is unaware of like, oh, like they're just Allison's just an annoying nosy neighbor, not realizing, oh, that's your sister-in-law. Because the moment she finally puts that stuff together, then that's when everything's really going to start falling apart. Will we see any more of Kurt, I wonder? Maybe, maybe not. Just in totality, like what other shenanigans are going to go down? What kind of, because things are just going to get worse and worse. Where things stand between Sam and Allison, he kind of blew up his life a little for her. He left Jen, but that's kind of more so on him. But will we dive into more of that? Will there be any more interactions between Allison and Sam? I'm sure that's still going to be potentially an ongoing thing. Like, there's just a lot of moving pieces I'd love to see what they do given a second season. Like I said, I'm crossing my fingers, really hoping for one. So we'll have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, a little light to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.